Hi there. It's a lot going on right now. A lot going on in our society, and I know, like me, many of you are exhausted, right? Feeling a sense of hopelessness, despair, discouragement, disgust. I get it. I get it. I'm not far from those emotions myself. I don't know about you, but I feel like morality is on the stand. Like morality is on trial for us right now as a nation. We're going to hear a lot about it. We hear a lot about moral courage. We hear a lot about, individuals going against their word and not being honest or forthright or integral or moral. That's what we're talking about today. We're talking about morality. What is it? And how can we be more moral? My name is Jennifer Mitchell Early. I help individuals and teams achieve organizational and personal success. And this is Leadership Matters. So in talking about morality or any subject, I always like to ground us and set expectations with what is the definition? What is the definition of morality? And I'm going to read here from the Merriam-Webster dictionary, merriam-webster.com, that says morality, A, a moral discourse, statement, or lesson. B, a literary or other imaginative work teaching a moral lesson. 2, A doctrine or system of moral conduct. 3, conformity to ideals of right human conduct. 4, moral conduct, virtue. So I've done a video before in the past on leaders having moral courage and what that means, and having a moral compass and knowing the difference between right and wrong, good and evil, right? And so I really believe, at least for me, this has been a season that has highlighted morality. What is your moral character? What's your moral fiber? What constitutes your morality? And I think it's important because a lot of what we do in life is based on our own values and our own belief systems. We've talked about that before. And when I think about being moral, and I think about automatically uprightness, being upright, being integral, being honest, being fair, being equitable, all those terms start to pull in for me. And so when I think about what is on the line, if I feel like morality is on trial, right? Is it really important? Does morality really matter? Because everything that we're seeing right now contradicts that. It contradicts whether or not we should have moral leaders, whether or not we should have moral parents, whether or not people should be moral as a human being, whether or not morality matters, whether or not there is value in being moral. So if I really gave it some thought and I were honest with you, I think that there have been two primary occasions where morality was kind of front and center for me, where I had to choose how I would respond. The first was I was married and I was a leader, minister in the church. And my husband and I both, he was a pastor, and everybody would look to us for, an example of a godly marriage. And, we were up and coming, we were young, and I would always hear, whenever there was strife, and I would share it, but what about your ministry? So that was something that was a mantle that I wore, right? To have to be concerned about the people that were waiting on our ministry. I also had, at the time, my daughter was 2. And so we were obviously very active in the church. And I had to face the reality of what was going on in my marriage versus the face and the parts of us that we allowed to be shown or on display, the mask that we wore, if you will, when we were in church. For those of you who have followed my channel or know a little bit about me, you know that I'm an author, that I wrote a book, I Will Survive in Jesus' Name. That's one of 2 books and a curriculum that I wrote. And that book was about, was a fictional work loosely based on my life and the fact that I had overcome domestic violence. And so I say that to say that I was faced with doing what was right versus what was wrong, continue to live a pretense, and it affecting not just the people who were following our ministry, but more importantly and most importantly, my daughter. Because I didn't want her to see us in church and think that, you know, that was one thing, and then see us at home and think, oh, those 2 things are connected, because they were not. One was the reality of what was happening in behind closed doors. And another one was a pretense, was, you know, us acting because we were in the presence of other individuals. And, you know, I, for one, did not want the judgment of that was associated with what I was going through. So that was one. Second time was my political life, because one thing about politics is once you've been in politics and you understand politics, then you understand that politics isn't everything. So when I see what's going on a federal, national level, I am not confounded, because this is what I deal with on a local level. And the saying that absolute power corrupts absolutely has been my experience. Not that it has corrupted me, but I've watched people, you know, and the power and the influence and the authority that comes with those positions kind of like lose it, you know, lose their mind. Or I don't know if I would say lose their mind, because I really believe it just brings out what's actually already in you. And so thankfully, you know, I've talked about before having my father as a mentor, and that kind of grounded me. And because I'm never racing and running to be in the forefront of anything, that did not woo me. Like I wasn't all inspired or awestruck or intoxicated by the notoriety that came with my position. It is a job. It's a thankless job for the most part, that even though it's a part-time position with a very small stipend, it comes with full-time responsibilities, full-time, weighty, heavy, life-changing, often for my community responsibilities. And so that's when I can see the moral compass at work, right? That's when I can see what people will do, because when you're around power, money, influence, prestige, and people who can make or break a career or set you up in positions and places that you never thought you would be in, there is something clearly intoxicating about that. There's something that will turn ordinarily, you know, I don't want to say normal, but average individuals into somebody. Like if you've ever been on a college campus, maybe you can relate to this. How people were before they became Greek, because being Greek put them in a position of influence and authority and, you know, social power that they didn't have beforehand. And so those are the things that I immediately think about. So when I look at what's going on now, and I see the blatant conflict between being immoral and being moral, and the fact that it's being normalized, like some of these decisions, like, oh, well, we're just going to fill a seat because we have the opportunity. Never mind the fact that it's right or wrong. Never mind the fact and the lessons and the precedents that are being set. Never mind the examples that we're even setting for our young people now who are watching it, who will grow up to believe this could be knitted into their value system, that this is right. So I felt led today to talk about that and to challenge us to be more moral. And when I say that, I don't say it from, you know, a judgmental vantage point. Like, I'm not saying it from a churchy standpoint, or I'm going to beat you up with morality or the definition, because we're all challenged, I think, in different ways every day to be our best person, right? To put our best foot forward, to show grace. And it doesn't do us any good to beat people up with the law, whether it be biblical law or whatever your standards are, to try to hold someone else to that. But instead to kind of lead by example, right? The whole be kind thing comes from our paying it forward, feeds into that premise that if we set the example, that some people will follow it. And the more people that follow it, the more people that are being kind will outweigh the people that are being unkind. So today we're just going to talk about a couple tips about showing and instilling morality. So the first thing I want to talk about, and we've talked about a couple times on this channel, is honesty. And I've said before that I was raised under the mantra that honesty is the best policy. And it was interesting because I was watching a program called Below Deck. And every now and again I catch it. I'm not a fan of the show. That means that I don't, watch it regularly. But I happen to be watching, and the captain of the ship, the male captain, there's two. I think there's the Mediterranean and there's the original. So I was watching the original, and I don't even know the captain's last name. But the captain of the ship was talking to one of his managers who managed, I think, the deckhands, and he was having an issue with was a young male, and young male manager. He was having an issue with a female subordinate. And so, this issue had kind of blown out of proportion. And the captain was talking to him about his management style and basically saying, you can't run from situations because they're always there. You're going to have to, at some point, meet them head on. And so he asked the young man, did you tell her like working with her was difficult, blah, blah, blah? And the guy was like, yeah. So they showed the clip, and the young man was brutally honest. So let me say this. And the captain said, I don't think that honesty is always a good management style. And so I took issue with that. I take issue with that. I think that honesty and tact go hand in hand. I think there's a way that you can be honest with someone and also be tactful. And if you've listened to any of my videos, I've said before, my mother describes me as a bull in a china shop, and that I've had to work on wrapping my words because my delivery hasn't always been great. And so because I speak rapidly, I think you know that just from watching this video, if I start to slow the pace of my words, that means I'm actively thinking about how I can wrap my words so that I can present them in the most diplomatic manner, so that I can, say to you, because I also taught interpersonal communications. I was a professor of interpersonal communication, so that there's not a lot of noise in my message, that my message will be received in the way that I intend to send it out. And that can't always be controlled, but to the degree that I can, I try to mitigate those factors so that if there's an issue, that we're talking about the issue as opposed to a personal situation that may have arisen between the two. It's not about personality. It's about this issue and how together we're going to resolve the issue, how together we're going to work on whatever comprises this issue, because the issue is what's at hand. So I said that to say that I still believe that honesty is the best policy. I still feel like being authentic and forthright is important. And I also believe that being tactful, diplomatic, and conscientious in your speaking and in the message that you send are equally as important, because you don't want to distort your message. Although it's honest, you don't want to pervert it so that it comes out as a dagger instead. And sometimes when we're not conscientious about the way and the manner in which we speak, or we're not conscientious about our leadership style and the need to sometimes flex in that style so that we can meet the individual that we're talking to where they're at, and that it's going to be presented in such a way that it will be best received, then we lose sight of that. And so the honesty kind of gets outweighed. It kind of gets muted, if you will, because the way that we did it, my mother used to say, it's not what you said, it's how you said it. And so I just want to leave you with that. But honesty is still very important, as is the way that you package it. Two, you have to have courage. That's why there's moral courage, because it's not easy to assert yourself. It's not easy to advocate for someone else's position when it may cause you some detriment yourselves. I think that we have become so desensitized with the protests because we're always in a position, it appears, in the last couple years where we're protesting something. We always have a reason to assert ourselves and to make our voices heard and to stand for issues, whether it be women's right, Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ plus situations where there's not been equality. So people protest as their First Amendment right to make their voice heard. And so I believe that when that happens, we assume that it's easy to get out in those streets. It's easy to be in the midst of looters and rioters while you try to protest. And those, and individuals who are coming in opposition of your cause. It takes courage to get out in those streets day in and day out. It takes courage to be identified by people that you work for and with as someone who stands for this particular policy or this particular issue, because you never know how that's going to cost them in some other aspect of their lives. So it takes courage to be moral and to stand for what you believe is right. Something else that my mother used to tell me growing up, and I'm sure I've said it here, because the great thing about doing this YouTube channel is not only do I get to interact with you, but I get to really sit back and think about all of the life lessons that I've learned thus far and how they've applied to my life and been applicable. And one of the things that she used to say to me, beyond honesty is your best policy, is your word is your bond. That's all you have is your word. She would say it to me, and she would really emphasize it with my brother, because as a Black man, she felt like a lot of times all you have is your word. Your word is your bond. And for me, that means keep your promises. There's not a whole lot that I say. I don't sell wolf tickets. Let me put it that way. If I say it, I'm going to do it. And it's not a whole lot that I lend my voice to that I don't 100% back up or intend to back up. Your promise, your word is everything. Your word lets people know whether or not you're trustworthy. So for everything that's going on right now in our nation with, I felt differently after the Kavanaugh hearings, or, I said that, 3 years ago, is your word your bond or no? Because if your word isn't your bond and I don't know whether or not I can trust you now, that means that now you've set a precedent that you are not trustworthy, because you can flip-flop. You can say something today and it means something else to you tomorrow or next year or 2 years from now. Be honest. Keep your promises. Remember that your word is your bond. Make sure that your word means something. This is a good one, especially right now. Don't cheat. Cheaters never prosper. Didn't you learn that growing up? That what's done in the dark eventually comes to light? That eventually everything that you've done will catch up to you. And once you're known as a cheater, you're always known as a cheater. It invalidates any successes you've ever had. Don't stack the deck. You should be so confident in your abilities and your skills, in your education, in whatever the work that you've put in to get to the place that you are, that what God has for you is for you, that nobody and nothing can take that from you. And that even if things don't work out the way you want them to, they're always working out for your good. And you have no idea what's on the horizon. You have no idea that if one door closes, it's because another one is getting ready to open up for you. But if you cheat the system, you really cheat yourself. And then you cheat everybody who's looking towards you for some guidance, who's looking towards you as an example. You cheat everybody. But more than anything else, you cheat yourself. Take responsibility for your actions is the next tip. It's not always easy to admit when you're wrong. It takes a big person. It takes someone who is comfortable expressing that they may have made a mistake and acknowledging how that mistake may have impacted others. But it is a definite indicator of maturity. Maturity as it relates to your own morality and character, but also whether or not you're ready for a position where if you make a mistake, part of being a leader is owning it and saying, hey, this is what occurred. I take full responsibility for it. You know, even if you don't know about it, even if it's something that happens with individuals who report up to or through you, the fact of the matter is you're the leader. So the buck stops with you. So if there was an issue where you didn't catch it based on oversight, or where you gave a go ahead, or maybe you didn't have the parameters in place to do a review process beforehand, whatever the case may be, people respect when other people say I've made a mistake. And I know in some environments, it's almost like, you know, tossing, you feel like saying, okay, I made a mistake, is like throwing blood in the water with a bunch of sharks and you'll be attacked. But it also shows the example of it's okay to make mistakes. It's not the mistakes, and I've said this before, it's not the mistakes that define us. It's how we come back from those mistakes. It's how we own up to our responsibility in those mistakes that define us and defines our trajectory for success and how far we can go. Because again, it goes back to, if you're individuals who report up to or through you feel like they always got a CYA because you're going to throw anybody under the bus at any given time just to save yourself, they're never going to, you will be thrown under the bus because they'll always have more ammunition than you, because they're now going to be prepared for, that's the way that you operate. And who wants to be on a team where it's every man for themselves? That's not really a team. And lastly, I'll leave you with being tolerant of differences. I have a video here about embracing differences, and I don't know how to say it other than everybody doesn't think like you. Everybody doesn't think like me, and that doesn't make their process any less valuable than yours or mine. It just means that we perceive things differently based on our life experiences, based on what we've been exposed to, based on our beliefs and our values. It doesn't mean that we are any less valuable, we make any less of a contribution than the other person does. So part of being moral is understanding, and this was a big deal for me, especially as I came into Christianity as a new believer. I talked about before being a Bible thumper, and, basically abusing people with scripture. It came to a point where I know what word says and I can apply it to my life, and I'm a minister, I can teach it. But I also know that love, covers a multitude of sins. And ultimately, it's my walk with the Lord, or higher power, how your walk with the Lord, higher power, whatever you reference it as. And the best thing that I can do is to give grace in the process. And I don't want to judge you, because I don't want you to judge me, because I know that nobody walked the earth without sin or blemish but Jesus. I know that I am a work in progress. And I believe in telling the truth and shaming the devil, because then you'll have nothing to use against me, because it's not even about you. It's about me. So being able to acknowledge that we're all different and we all make a contribution in different ways, I think is an indicator of morality. When all you see is one way, there's only one way, there's only one race, there's only one gender, there's only one thing, there's only one religion, there's only one. I feel like we make the mistake of being so close-minded with blinders on that we miss out on the beauty that has been created. There's a reason why there are different churches. There's a reason why there are different teaching styles. There's a reason why there's a multitude of YouTube channels. There are reasons why, diversity is in the earth for a reason. There's a diversity in grass, diversity in plants, diversity in dogs, diversity in cats, diversity. So we have to learn how to embrace differences and not be threatened by them. The more you learn, and the more open you are to learning different things, number one, the more that you can contribute, the more vast your own knowledge and understanding. And I think the more open you are to giving grace to things you don't understand and being able to identify it as I just don't understand it. I don't get it, but I'm not going to judge it. So I'm going to leave you with that because I think things like seeking justice, go without saying. I think things like having humility and being generous and being kind, those things go without saying. You start with yourself, that we start with ourselves and that we display more morality. We demand more morality in the positions that are supposed to represent us because if you're supposed to represent me and I'm moral and you're not, we have a disconnect right there. So it's a lot going on right now, but it's not something that cannot be fixed. It's not something that collectively, that together, we don't have the power to change. And we have to be very careful about what we're teaching our young people at this time and what they're seeing and what we're not correcting. When we normalize these types of behavior and we don't correct it, our children grow up believing that this is right, which skews their moral compass. So thank you guys for hanging with me. I've been trying to, hit you with quick videos. And for me, it's hard because I have a lot of information. I want to give it all to you at one time. But as a learning and development consultant, I know that's not the best way to give you information that you'll be able to retain. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that every time I upload new content, which is weekly, you'll be the first to know. Thanks, everybody, and stay up.